All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are privileged to be joined by Mark Gaughan, from the sports writer from the Buffalo News for 40 years. He's covered the Bills since the late 80s, covered 20 Super Bowls, 10 major golf championships, the president of the Pro Football Writers of America, a voter for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I can't wait to get into that with him. We talked to Vic a little bit about that, and for 12 years, a trainer for Dale Carnegie Leadership Training Program. It sounds interesting. Also for 20 years, Buffalo native, graduate of Buffalo State College. And Mark, thanks for joining us.
Okay, it's my pleasure, Don.
Yeah, so Mark, we like to ask the guys who come on who played for the team kind of about their football journey, high school, college, the draft. I guess as a writer, could you kind of like take us back to your high school, college days? Did you play? Did you know you wanted to be a writer? Was it always football? Like what brought you down this path?
Josh contends that you were an intern for Art Wander, but that hasn't been verified.
No. I preceded Art. Actually, around the same time. Anyway, I participated in sports in high school, but wasn't very good. But I always liked to write. I was always good in English, so I'm kind of lucky. I kind of knew that, or felt like that was the path I wanted to go on, and majored in journalism in college at Buffalo State College. It was a really good time to go to Buffalo State. I think I spent $640 a semester on my college education, so that was nice. And so I wound up getting a internship at the Buffalo News. I actually wound up getting a part-time job as a clerk at the Buffalo News in 1981, taking high school scores. Mm-hmm. So you'd sit in the office, and the high school teams coaches would call in their scores. I was one of the people who did that, and then I wound up getting an internship at the Buffalo News for 2 summers while I was in college. And then the Buffalo News at the time, the Binghamton paper was sort of the AAA farm team of the Buffalo News. So they shipped me out there I worked there only 9 months. And then they had an opening. Dick Johnston, hockey writer, longtime Sabres writer, retired. So they brought me in to fill that opening, not to fill his job, but to come on the staff. So been there since full-time since 1984. May of 1984.
That's great.
So you got in on the ground floor of the Bills, right? That was their real dark period. Some 2 and 14.
Yeah, I didn't really start. Yeah, I started covering high schools at first, and I did my first Bills assignment was in 1982 at training camp. I wrote a story on a receiver named Robert Holt. So I remember that one, but I started when they started going to the playoffs. I joined in as one of the contributors on the beat, and then I just started doing road games. So I did a lot of home games in the late '80s and playoff games, but then started doing road games as well as home games in 1992.
Yeah. So at Buff State, sounds like you had a good experience. You certainly got a great value from what you said of a career. My wife attended Houghton College. That's where I met her, but she did her graduate work as a teacher at Buff State. And she had a good experience, except for the parking. Did you at least earn like your own parking spot there?
No. I actually walked to school for part of I lived kind of near there. But no, it was a great, absolutely, it's I got a great education. I think the SUNY system, you can't beat the value. You have to do the work. I'm a proud graduate of Buffalo State. I was the editor of the paper there, the student newspaper, The Record. Cool. And had a great time there, made great relationships, worked with a lot of really quality people at the student paper.
So as the Bills got good, did you notice anything different? Did you feel a different way because you were local? I know some of the guys come in from other portions of the country and become a reporter. Were you a fan of the team before you became a writer? Did that go away? Like, did you find yourself in the 90s, getting caught up in the team, or how difficult was it to kind of separate you being from here with the team, finally getting good?
Yeah, that's a great question. I certainly was a fan of the team growing up, but as you go to college and you train to be a journalist, I covered a lot of games in college for various. I volunteered for papers, and then when I started at the news, I covered hundreds of high school games. And you learn you need to be an objective observer. So you can't be a fan of the team. And after you cover, hundreds, so I covered hundreds of games before I even covered my first Bills game. And that is great training. And you really learn that you don't, it's a big taboo to be a fan of the team you're covering because it's bad. It gets you into trouble whether they win or they lose. If they win and you're a fan of the team, you run the risk of jumping on the bandwagon. Woohoo! They're great. Man, when maybe the other team just wasn't very good that day, and you run the risk of inflating expectations higher than they should be inflated. And then if you're a fan of the team and they lose, then you run the risk of how dare they spoil my day. And you run the risk of being more negative than maybe you need to be. Maybe they lost, and the other team is just better, and they actually played well in defeat. So it is very critical as a journalist to be an unbiased observer of whatever you're covering, whether you're covering police, city hall. The education beat, I'm there to observe and report. That's my obligation to the reader. And so, and like I said, before I even covered my first game, I had covered hundreds of games. So you get a lot of practice, practice looking at the game objectively. Why did this team win or this team lose?
As a follow-up to that, did you find yourself, though, rooting for individuals ever?
You try not to do that either. I mean, certainly there's people you cover who you respect and you like, but no, not really. I mean, again, that is clouding your judgment. If you're really rooting for a particular player and they screw up and I certainly had a great deal of respect for Jim Kelly, but there were games where he threw 4 interceptions, and you gotta say right that he played bad. Yeah. Now he didn't play bad very often, but again, the same risk is in play both ways. If you tend to like the person or if you don't connect with the person, you're letting that cloud your judgment. So and again, after covering hundreds and hundreds of games, you get trained to look at sporting events like this, and it's not hard.
Sure. Now, credibility is so important. So when you go back to your covering the Bills, you said it was 1982 or 83. We had Pete Metzelaars on, and he was in Seattle in 83. They were a playoff team. And he told us a funny story that if you were playing badly in Seattle, they said, "Hey, if you don't shape up, we're going to send you to Buffalo." And of course, he was traded to Buffalo, and he got here, in the down part 2-14 seasons. But then, the rise started to happen. You mentioned Jim Kelly, so a couple questions. As you followed the rise of the team, you kind of had a parallel path because, you're talking about your humble beginnings covering high school games, then coming to the Bills, and you end up, being the president of Pro Football Writers of America. So your career path was on the same path as the Bills. So how did that had to be exciting. And then real quick, when Jim Kelly was signed, that was maybe the biggest news story in Bills history. What was your role that day? And then again, your own rise along with the Bills.
Yeah. It's a glad. I love Pete. Pete is a great guy. You had him on the show. Pete was an outstanding, one of the more underrated players on the Bills. He was a high quality tight end, great blocker. The day they beat Kansas City for their 4th AFC title, Pete was awesome that day blocking for Thurman Thomas. Anyway, I digress. What was the question again? The Jim Kelly. Yeah. I wasn't involved in the coverage that day in 1986, August 13th, 1986, or something like that.
Okay.
Early August 1986, he came in, and I was not covering that story. I was still covering high schools in 1986 full time. I mean, I probably covered a game or two that season, but I wasn't covering the team. But it was apparent, I think, when Bill Polian came in and brought in Marv Levy, and obviously Jim Kelly. Everybody could tell Jim Kelly was legit, even though they went 4-12 in 1986. You could tell Kelly was the real deal right from his very first game in Buffalo against the Jets. And so, I mean, I think you didn't need to be a genius to figure out they were ascending. Right. And then Polian and Marv started, just to stack better moves on top of better moves. I mean, and really the Cornelius Bennett trade was, that maybe a real coup there, that Polian was all Polian engineering that. And I would say that was a watershed moment in the building of the Bills, just because that was something that the front office engineered and created on their own and made that happen.
Yep.
Did the news start dedicating more resources to the team as the team got better? Like, did your career, was it helped at all that they were good?
The Buffalo News covered it wasn't more, I would say. The Bills have been the dominant sports news entity, and that really hasn't changed since the mid '60s. The early '60s even. So I would say the amount of resources, the coverage has been intense and extensive since the mid '60s. That hasn't changed. I will say that in the past 5 or 6 or 7 years, maybe since 2016, 2017, the coverage is more than it ever was. We covered the team incredibly extensively in the Super Bowl era. Those 4 years, we cover them way more than we did in 1990 to 1993. And part of that is just, there's a lot of reasons for that. The internet, the need to drive traffic to your sites, but even more than that, the coverage of the NFL is bigger. The NFL has done, I'm sure you've talked about it on this podcast, an amazing job of engineering, manufacturing the calendar to dominate the news year round. And that's good for business for the NFL. And so, back in 1993, they'd hold an OTA in May. They'd be there practicing 4 days. We'd write one story that week. We'd cover 1 day of the OTA.
Wow.
Now, we have like 3 people covering the OTA every day of the OTs of the OTAs. And it's driven by the NFL network, partly.
The NFL network was first to dedicate itself to one sport, right?
I believe so. Yeah. In other cities, is the coverage as intense, around the country as it is here?
In some other cities it is, but in a lot of other cities it isn't. So, I would say in depends on the city. You know, I mean, in a lot of cities it's as intense, but in some cities, you know, I mean, Phoenix, there's no way the Cardinals are covered as intensely as the Bills. Houston, Atlanta, no. I mean, it also depends a little bit on how much how many other major sports teams there are. So in Atlanta, you know, the Georgia Bulldogs are a are covered like a pro sports franchise. And they have 4, major sports or 3 major sports teams. So in San Francisco is covered extensively, probably not as extensively as the Bills. The Buffalo. So, a few of the places in, maybe 40% of the markets, it's covered as much as the Buffalo News, but in 60% or the Buffalo Bills, but in 60%, maybe not.
Was your role as president of the Pro Football Writers of America a place where this information was something you monitored?
No, how the amount of coverage, no. That was the Pro Football Writers. Fills various functions, including running sports writing contests. Looking out for access. Basically, monitoring and protecting access to players. So the NFL has decided. The NFL owners have decided that having a lot of access to the media is in their best interest. And that's why in every player's contract, they have a clause that says they have to deal with the media. And that is not because the NFL owners want to help the local newspapers make money. It's because they've decided that, again, this year-round news cycle is good for their profit margin. It is good. Going back to the last question, on the first week of April on ESPN's website, the amount of hits for the NFL, I've talked to people for ESPN, it dwarfs, more than quadruple. It's astronomically higher hits for the NFL the first week of April, just dwarf hits for Major League Baseball. And it's the opening of the season for Major League Baseball. NFL dwarfs Major League Baseball even on the first week of April. So and why is this good for business? Because the more ratings and the more advertising dollars come in, the more money goes to the owners and the players. That's why it's good that's why the owners want want the NFL network. They want the coverage because, the more ad dollars ESPN and the NFL network take in April, the more revenue funnels to everybody.
The first contract I ever negotiated, the rookie contract, was Mario Hagan. He was a linebacker in the early 2000s, and his agent was Ben Dogra out of St. Louis, and
famous agent, big time agent.
Right, and he was a marketing guy. He also had a marketing firm. So the media clause came out that year, and I sent it to him. He thought it was going to be an easy contract. He's like, whoa, what is this? And I said, well, it's basically for the teams to have some control over the media, where if a player is going to do an appearance, that if he's going to do an appearance for someone who may be a competitor of a team sponsor, they have to get our permission first. And he said, well, wait, that's pretty restrictive. And he said, I don't like it. And he was going to hold Mario Hagan, a 7th round pick, out of camp because of it. And I went back to Jim Overall from Tom. They were shocked. And finally he said, look, if you can show me that, I think it was Willis McGahee was the first pick that year. If you can show me that he signed it, I'll sign it. But otherwise he was going to hold the 7th round pick. So the media component, kind of, in a negative way for the agents, they thought they were going to lose control, but it was real. I remember.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And again, it's all about the motivation is to drive revenue, and they do a great job of it.
Do you find now, do most of the players buy into that narrative? Like, obviously on a day-to-day basis, sometimes they probably don't want to talk to you guys. They might be aggravated after a practice, after a loss. But do you feel like the vast majority of players kind of buy into the narrative that the media, does benefit them, even if they don't see it in the moment?
Yeah, I would say yes. I don't know how much all of them think deeply about it, but the overwhelming majority of players are very cooperative, and it's a professional relationship. They understand they're in the spotlight, and they understand if the team loses, they're going to be asked about what went wrong. And they're, I mean, I would say it is a very professional relationship with the 98% of the players, and 98% of the players are really are cooperative and fine. Yeah, there's a days when I go up to a player after practice and he says, "No, I can't do it today. I got treatment." Or, "You know what? I'm getting my car detailed today. Talk to me. How about tomorrow?" It's fine. Okay, we'll do it tomorrow. Or, you know what I mean? Or maybe we know that he's been under fire and not playing well, and the pressure is on, and they're self-imposed pressure. You know what I mean? They know when the team is losing and they're not doing well, and maybe they don't want. No, I don't want to talk today. And okay, so I go up to him next week. But that most of the time, yeah, okay, what's up? They're very, to make it to the NFL, you have to be a incredibly motivated super achiever.
Mm-hmm.
And because it takes almost a 52-week a year commitment to keep yourself, and because somebody else is gunning for your job. I mean, obviously the top 10 most supremely talented players in the league, yes, they're on any team, yeah, they'd be making it no matter what. But I mean, most of the guys can't afford to slack off. They have to be intensely driven 50 weeks of the year.
Speaking of like competition and all, do you feel that in your profession as well? I was with the Bills for 4 years in the merchandise department, and then I was a coaching assistant, and I did notice, like, with the media back then in the old administration building, it was like all you guys like in one room downstairs, and it felt kind of like a scrum sometimes, and kind of haphazard and a little crazy. Is there a lot of competition, within your profession? Is there more now that there's like new media, bloggers, people like us, podcasters, whatever? Like, do you feel that same kind of like pressure and competition, with the other guys covering the team?
Yeah, I absolutely. It is, it is competitive. You have to be paying attention to be on top of everything. When you walk in the locker room, on any given Wednesday or Thursday, who is newsworthy on that given day. You need to know and be paying attention and to who's saying what. So, yes, because you don't want to have somebody, say something significant and you were not paying attention. So yes, there is quite a bit of competition, and that's fun. It makes it challenging, and it in a way it's fun to have to be on top of that.
Sure. Keeps you sharp, especially when the Buffalo News is the paper of record. One of the things I wanted to ask you is, I know your word, your credibility, as you've said, is so important. And if you have that, you're more likely to be able to have trust in people to talk to you again. But when you're maybe not in an official work capacity and you're out and someone says something to you and they say, "Hey, this is off the record," how much do you wrestle with that? If you think, first of all, that it's credible and it could be a news story, but they say it's off the record, meaning don't print it, but maybe they're kind of vague about it, a gray area. How hard is that to sort of navigate? Have you had situations where you really wrestle with that kind of situation?
Well, it is fairly clear cut your responsibility as a reporter is to make it clear cut. So if I'm talking to a player or a coach or an administrator, I need to make it clear. Look, we're on the record here.
Mm-hmm.
And if they say, okay, well, I don't really want to talk about it, but I will talk to you on background. Then you have to make a decision. Okay, all right, look, I'm gonna. That's okay. Or if it's, look, there might be a situation where you say, look, we need to this is important. The readers need to get an answer, what you have to say about this. If you want to say, I decline to comment, okay, that's what I'll write. So you should be clear with the player or the source right up front, whether they're talking on the record and they're not. And that eliminates problems. But certainly there's time, then I'd say, I don't really comfortable talking about this, but I'll tell you a few things on background.
Interesting.
And that's usually fine, but as long as we both know that's the way it is. But there are some times where they say, look, I'll talk off the record, and you say, well, I understand your desire to talk on the record, but this is a story where the readers need to know, are you saying anything or not? So you tell me.
That's fair.
On the record.
That's fair. One of my friends who I told that we were going to have you on the show, he had a question. Do sources, like unnamed sources, anonymous sources, like information you guys get, not necessarily specifically you, but do you usually pursue sources, or do sources typically come to a media person like yourself?
That depends. I would say more often the media pursues them, but certainly, especially, nowadays with social media, we get emails and messages or text messages from people saying, hey, be on the lookout for this, or you should look into this. We try hard to limit the amount of unidentified sources that we put in print, because if it is overdone, it does, I believe, hurt credibility if you're using too many unidentified sources. Now, I mean, obviously, there are some situations where it's this news isn't going to come out if you don't nobody on the team they can't say it, come out and say that they're being named on this issue. So you have to do it sometimes, but you should, as a reporter, try to limit the amount of times you use unidentified sources.
Yeah, for the record, we pursued you. We're happy to have you here. So thanks for being with us. But we have a few more things we want to talk to you about. But one of the situations in recent Bills history I can imagine was challenging was after Damar Hamlin, of course, was hospitalized. Everyone was hanging on the edge of their seats to find out anything they could. And his uncle, who I'm sure meant well, but he was kind of the only voice out there that we were hearing that, Damar Hamlin was responsive and blinked or talked or did something. And I'm sure, you wanted to believe him, but when you report something like that without the team or the hospital or league coming out and saying, hey, this is a situation, how much can you put in a situation like that where, family member, how did you navigate that?
Well, that was one where, I mean, he was a relative of the family, and he was willing to go on the record saying, this is who I am and this is what I've heard. Mm-hmm. So you just report it and let the reader know, here's where it's coming from. Mm-hmm. If he had said, I'm the uncle, you can't say it's coming from me, when it comes to a health issue, that would be different if he hadn't allowed his name to be put on it, because now you're talking about confidential health information and how much can you trust this guy as an unidentified source. But since he was willing to say, this is who I am, this is my name, and this is what the situation is, okay, we're attributing it to him. And of course, that was obviously it was on leading the nightly news there, that day after the game, NBC, so there were every major network, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, were staked out there outside of the emergency room entrance of the medical center in Cincinnati. And that's how he was flagged down, visiting DeMar.
That story, obviously, with all the national attention, both football writers and then just general interest writers as well. Can you maybe tell people the difference? Like what is your interaction with like a national writer like Peter King or like somebody who's not following the team every day like you are, like your colleagues that are at One Bills Drive every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? When these national guys come in, are they viewed differently? Like, are they annoying?
No, I mean, it's standard. It's like it's with the NFL Network now. I mean, it's just part of the routine. It's part of the routine. For the entire drought, there was very rarely any NFL national people coming because the Bills were the most off the radar team in the league, or one of the most. Now it's very common for to have national, well-known national media celebrities, if you will, come in for the 3 days before Sunday's game. But I guess it just depends on. I mean, a lot of them do their. A lot of them don't need to call me. They have their own. They've covered the team extensively on their own. But Peter King is. I've known Peter King for many decades, and we chat when at the combine or wherever. If we're at the same national event. So there is a little bit of back and forth with people and have a relationship. Yeah.
Yeah. Mark, we had Vic Carucci on, I think, back in September.
Yeah.
And it was great. But he, like you, have been on the Pro Football Hall of Fame selection committee. And he kind of talked us through the process. But I'd love to hear your perspective. On that day, the big meeting, and obviously you have to keep things secretive and no leaks, but what are your memories? How did that play out? And are there a couple examples of maybe surprises, players that you either thought would make it and didn't, or vice versa? And but take us through that. I always find that fascinating.
Yeah, well, the day before the Super Bowl, historically, that's the way it worked. Was there used to be 34 and then 40 selectors to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and the Saturday, the day before the Super Bowl game, at the site of the Super Bowl, there would be a long 8-hour meeting where the 15 finalists were debated and then voted on, and a maximum of 5 out of the 15 would get in the Hall of Fame. And generally the way it works is the 15 finalists, each one, one person of the 40 voters, now there's 48 voters, stands up and gives a 5 or 10 minute talk about stating the case for why this person should be in the Hall of Fame. The floor is opened. There is a group a round of discussion, which could last anywhere from 1 minute to 40 minutes. Depending on the person, and then at the late in the meeting, votes are cast to reduce the 15 down to 10, and then down to 5, and then you vote up and down on the 5. Now, lately, in the last few years, they've altered the rules of the meeting a little bit, and it's been done virtually, and there's a time limit on discussion. so that the meeting doesn't go 8 or 9 hours, which it did for many, many years. When I was a voter, most of the meetings were 8 or 9 hours. So it was a privilege, it was a privilege to, serve on the committee and be a voter. It's very difficult. I mean, the 15 finalists are they're all great, and it's just a question of a lot of times it's a question of which order should these people go in. Who are the 5 most deserving this year? And I would say on any given year of 15 finalists, most of those 15 are going to get in. At least 10 of the 15 ultimately are going to get in. But there is a lot of attention, and there is you feel an obligation to serve the player, the players you're representing, but really to do enough homework on all the players, because even though you might be presenting one player, it's your obligation to view them all again in from an unbiased standpoint, and vote for who you think belongs in. The hard thing, I would say, one of the hard things is every fan base thinks their guy is loyal to their guy, and their guy should be in. So every year, 5 get in, and 10 fan bases are outraged that their guy didn't get in, even though the reality is next year or the year after, their guy is going to get in. A bunch of those guys. And it also becomes difficult for the finalists too. And I know this from experience, because, they're 15 of the greatest players of all time. The vote comes out, only 5 can get in, and the 10 guys who don't get in, even if it's from a rational standpoint, they might say to themselves, well, I know I'm going to get in the year or two. They feel like they've lost. They feel like losers a little bit, even though they're 15 of the greatest players of all time. And that's tough. And then you can imagine being a finalist, you don't finish in the top 5. And now that whole weekend, you're getting calls from your kids and your family members and your high school coach, crying, I'm sorry you didn't get in. And it becomes traumatic for the finalists who don't get in, or it can be, understandably, even though it's an incredible honor to be in the final 15.
Right, still no jacket like Shooter McGavin. Right?
Yeah. How many guys did you present for?
Let's see, a bunch. Joe DeLamalure, Ralph Wilson, Andre Reed, Thurman Thomas, Bruce Smith, James Lofton. 6 off the top of my head.
You were 6-0.
6-0. So now, like when Tom Brady comes up, is that like a 3-second discussion? I mean, right?
Yeah.
That can't possibly take more than a minute.
Yeah. Dan Marino was stand up. Dan Marino, or Joe Montana. Bruce Smith was, less than a 1-minute prethousation.
Nice.
Just show us.
I didn't just stand up and say Bruce Smith and sit down, even though I could have. Though I could have. I didn't want to. I wanted to make sure, I don't want to, if he didn't get in that first year, the people, I would have looked bad. You know what I mean?
Sure, absolutely.
That would have been on you. So wrong sport.
I went for 45 seconds probably, but then sat down and shut up, because also the other voters know that then, and for instance, let's say Paul Tagliabue was extremely, the debates when I was on the committee on him lasted 40 minutes. So the other voters know, hey, we got some people here there's going to be long debates on. I don't want to talk about Bruce Smith. Let's just get up, get down, move on to the next candidate.
Interesting. That's so interesting. So wrong sport, I know, but the guy who didn't vote for Derek Jeter, How is that?
That was a good American. That's a solid American who
Like
has principles.
No,
we obviously have a Yankee and a Red Sox fan on this podcast, so I salute
the
that
baseball
guy.
I can't speak to the baseball.
Yeah,
The baseball
that's fine.
voting, of course, is very different.
okay.
Completely different system. I mean, some might think there's the better, worse, but one thing that. So anyway, the voters for the debate, there are way more voters, and they don't come together to listen to open debate.
Huh. Interesting.
Like the football, the football meeting, but there's just so many more voters they couldn't.
Well, before we do our final 2-minute warning segment, is there a former bill that's not yet in? Oh, put it this way: of the former bills that are not yet in, who is it that you feel would be most deserving?
Well, I mean, obviously, Steve Tasker is probably the greatest special teams player. Fred Smirlis, I think, was a great nose tackle who deserves to be discussed. Both of them are now senior candidates. So without getting into it, they've been retired they've been eligible more than 25 years and haven't been inducted. The challenge, it is hard to get special teamers in because, they play 17 to 20 plays a game. And, when it comes up to the vote, how do you put in a special teamer ahead of Anthony Munoz, who played 70 plays a game, or Jerome Bettis, who played 60 plays a game? It just becomes very hard, and that's why there's almost no special teamers in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
So that's a separate. We could do a whole podcast about that.
Yeah, no, that's interesting.
But that's essentially the reason Steve Tasker hasn't gotten in. And honestly, if you're voting, you can't put. It is very hard to put a great player who played 70 plays a game, Anthony Munoz, Randall McDaniel, in ahead of any special teamer. Ray Guy, the greatest punter, took 35 years to get in. Fred Smirlis, was the prototypical nose tackle. I think he deserves a close, hard look. The challenge for Fred is that he toiled most of his career on really bad teams. Now, he was on great teams, good teams, 80, 81, and 88, 89.
Right. Yep.
But a lot of his career was, a lot of great NFL defensive coaches, including like Dick Vermeil, they came to Buffalo just to watch Fred's technique playing nose tackle. So,
Matthew Slater is going to be an interesting, topic in a few years for Steve Tasker, because he just retired and he's been the best special teamer for the past 10, 15 years. So hopefully he doesn't get in and Steve doesn't. So we'll have to see. Mark, we're gonna let you be
tied. I think that if one gets in, that helps the other.
That's true.
Oh,
yeah. Hopefully so.
Ice. Yeah.
We're gonna you've been real generous with your time. We're gonna let you go here. Before we do, we play something with all of our guests called the 2-minute warning. We ask you 10 questions, hopefully in under 2 minutes, and you just give us kind of a rapid fire fun answer. So Don, fire away.
All right. Well, the first is most interesting place to watch a Bills game, but you're in the press box, so that we'll go on to number 2. 3 people, dead or alive, that you'd want to dine with.
Dead or alive? Sports figures or anybody?
No, anyone.
Abraham Lincoln. Well, this is tough. Okay. I'll just off the top of my head, Abraham Lincoln, Bruce Springsteen, and
people do struggle with this one.
Yeah,
Carl Sagan.
Carl Sagan.
Oh,
what is the which press box has the best food in the NFL?
I'm one of those. If you're there in the stadium for free and you're eating for free, I never ever complain about getting free food, even if it's not very good. So the Bills' food is it's fine.
all
The
good?
Bills' food is great. Dallas is great.
Tampa.
Kansas City is great. Barbecue. There's lots of them that are good.
Tampa had a what's the Cuban sandwich? Oh,
So good.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Restaurant worthy. Best concert
The
you've
more
ever seen.
I got the best
Yeah.
food town to eat. New Orleans is New Orleans, Kansas City are great food towns to eat.
We're gonna have to
Best
add that
road trip for Bill. I'm going to take the wheel on this. Best road trips for Bills fans. Kansas City, absolutely near the top. Green Bay, Nashville,
Yeah.
is great, and Miami is great just because for the weather. Those I would say would be must go-tos for Bills fans. Worst road trip for Bills fans by far, hands down, Foxborough.
There you go. Oh, yes.
Horrible. Stadium is in a horrible location.
Yeah.
Traffic is the worst.
Yep.
It is a nightmare. Regardless of anything that happens on the field, it's as if they put a stadium at Darien Lake. You know how you take the thruway, you get off that one lane road,
77
98 or whatever, 63 or 98 to go to Darien Lake. That's the Foxborough. You take a one lane. It's terrible, horrible.
Yeah, that question.
Hate Foxborough.
Best concert you've ever seen, Mark? I think I know.
Best concert I've ever seen was, I could list a bunch of them. John Fogerty of Creedence Clearwater Revival in Toronto on his 57th birthday in 1994. That would be number one.
That was memorable.
Favorite Buffalo restaurant, and what do you get there?
Ooh, favorite Buffalo restaurant is Sinatra's. Italian food. I get the greens and beans and calamari appetizers. And Sunday pork in the sauce, if they have it on the menu, or anything's great there.
Wow. Favorite cartoon growing up?
Favorite cartoon growing up. I mean, I liked I'll say the Batman TV show.
Oh yeah.
Which wasn't a cartoon, but the real one with Adam West. I would be allowed to stay up to watch the Batman TV show.
Awesome. Popular food, but you hate it.
I love food. I am a big eater.
That's such a detailed answer on the restaurant. Yeah.
Liver would be something I don't like. I don't know if that's popular, but I'm not no fan of liver.
All right. We're not trying to get a soundbite from you here, but the way you went off on New England, I think you'll answer this. The most annoying fan base of another NFL team from media perspective.
I'm going to give you annoying fan. I mean, let's face it. The fans are fanatical, right? I mean, they love their teams. I don't get annoyed by fans. I do not get annoyed by fans. I expect them to be fanatical and passionate and unreasonable. I will say this. The most annoying fan base in Western New York, here's a soundbite for you, is the St. Bonaventure fans.
Oh, yeah.
The basketball
They
guys.
are both, because now I love the St. Bonaventure fans, and God bless them for their support. But the St. Bonaventure fans are both, they both have a inferiority complex and a superiority complex, both at the same time.
That's classic. I went to a game a couple of years ago. My cousin works there, actually, in their administration, but he said that the fans, first of all, they're right on the court for basketball, and they study the opposing players' social media to know who their ex-girlfriends are.
Oh, there you
and
go.
they chant their names
I
at
like
them.
it.
That's a bucket list thing for.
Yeah.
If you're a Western New York diehard sports fan, you should go to a Bonnet game.
That's right. And as far as annoying fan bases, you say they're all fanatical. Luke Russer told us the Rams because they weren't fanatical.
That's right. Yeah. Luke
Absolutely.
Russell hates their. All right. So two more. I'm going to go off the board here. I forgot my question. I've never done that before.
Can you drive a stick shift?
Can you drive a stick shift?
I can.
Okay. Cool. I had if you needed one soundbite from 40 years of Bills history, who's your player?
Kent Hull. Ken Hall is
Oh,
number one interview, not because he was not a self-promoter, didn't seek out the media, but Ken Hall would give you a smart answer on just about anything. He's number one.
we had his son on, Drew, and for all of the praise that he heard from other people, a lot of people said he was smart, but I think let's add that to the list about how well he worked with the media.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great.
Last question, Don.
The last question: when you leave the house, do you leave your dryer on or your dishwasher on?
No.
Okay.
There you go.
Mark, this has been fantastic.
Yeah, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, my pleasure, guys. Take
Great
care.
talking with you. Thanks.